Hey Kingdom Builders, what happens when you take raw honesty, bold faith, and a sound that blends hip-hop, R&B, and poetry? You get Jekasole. In this interview, we get to know her and dive into her powerful new EP, Growing Pains. Stick around, this one's deep.
Blame game, blame game, blame game, blame game. Lose your mind, blame game, blame game. It's time to let it go. That's how we'll truly know. Without the pain, we cannot grow. No, we cannot grow.
Hey everyone, I'm Mike Laxton with Kingdom Builder TV. Today, I'm thrilled to introduce you to a dynamic artist, Jekasole, whose music blends honest storytelling, faith, and artistry in an unforgettable way. With her latest project, Growing Pains, she's diving deep into the bittersweet nature of transformation. Jekasole, welcome to Kingdom Builder.
Thank you for having me, Mike. Thank you guys for having me.
Well, it's a pleasure just to get to know you. And here today, we want to get to know a little bit about who you are, and then of course about this EP that you have coming out with Growing Pains here on the 24th of January. But just to start it off, for those who might be meeting you for the first time, can you kind of share a little bit about your background and how your journey began as an artist?
So first and foremost, my name is Jekasole, aka Bars and Baby Hairs. Okay, that's just kind of just what it is. But outside of that, kind of got into just music. Just started with poetry, and then basically going into like spoken word. So growing up, my cousins were actually very much a big inspiration to me wanting to write. It kind of became my outlet to be able to kind of just express myself. And then once I started like actually walking within my faith and wanting to dive deeper into my relationship with God, I felt like that was my way to communicate with him. But I come from a musical family. As far as everybody within my family, brother, sister, myself, like they have some type of profession within the entertainment field. And me and my brother actually started off as a group way back. So we started off as a group, and then eventually I ventured out and then became just independently just Jekasole.
It's good to hear some of your music, and it definitely adds a little bit different flavor to the plethora of music that's out there. But I know that you're from the South Florida area, specifically the Miami area. How is being from that part of the state influence your sound and the stories you tell?
I'm a Dade County baby, 305 Miami-Dade County, born and raised. Grew up in the city or just the neighborhood of Wynwood. If you go there now, it's very much gentrified, and everybody loves to go there for art, and paintings and things like that. But for the most part, it's given me just a different appreciation, where it's such a melting pot in Miami, where you have so many different cultures. I grew up in inner city, so I went to inner city school, so I got to communicate and kind of just cultivate relationships with different backgrounds, ethnicities, and being able to kind of just take my roots as far as like being Puerto Rican, but also raised within Wynwood, just kind of just being able to tell the stories from my point of view, but also giving it that flair, giving it that flavor. Like I didn't grow up in youth group, but at the same time, I didn't grow up in the streets. But it was just that combination of knowing that I have friends that their roots did run within the streets, and knowing that I have friends that their roots did run within the church, and kind of just being within that middle ground of like, being able to kind of see it on both ends, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, it definitely makes sense. Kind of merging the two different cultures, whether it's the street culture with the Christian culture, I guess, in a way, to kind of blend that together.
And Miami has their own lingo, so a lot of the stuff that I say, you're probably not gonna know unless you're from the city. But that's the fun part, because it gives you a certain appreciation where you're like, hey, I know what she just said. So,
well, it makes you more cultural and more diverse person too. Just learning what that's about. It's like, hey, what does this mean? What is she saying? So I think it's a good opportunity for, in a way, an educational opportunity for others too. So as far as your sound goes, it's very versatile. You have a little bit of hip hop, R&B. Of course, you mentioned spoken word, so you've got the poetry in there. How do you kind of approach that creative process of blending these elements together to reflect your heart and your faith?
So one of the biggest things that I kind of navigate within my creative process is I always ask God, what message does he want me to convey? That's always like my biggest thing of, what is it that you want me to convey? But at the same time, like presenting it in a way that doesn't feel cliche, but at the same time that feels natural to me. Growing up, I didn't grow up on gospel music. I grew up on a lot of R&B music, hip hop music. So just being able to kind of share my heart, but in a way where it still feels good. I grew up in an era where I am a 90s baby. So it's just like music was very different then than what it is now.
Hmm.
And it was just a certain nuance of authenticity, and you can just hear the heart within the artist's like songwriting. So I wanted to continue to cultivate that because truthfully, as we've expanded into where we are now, so it's like it just feels like a lot of music lacks substance and it
Hmm.
lacks feeling and emotion. And that was something that was really important to me, where I was like, God, being able to have a conversation and a relationship with you is intimate. There's feeling there. So I want to make sure that that translates and letting people know that I'm still a human
Hmm.
underneath all of it. So that was like a really big thing for me. And then always letting myself know that it's okay to have fun, because that's
Hmm.
always the hard part of it for me, where it's like it's not your typical approach as far as the plethora of different sounds within the genres specifically, even the topics, so it's just like just being able to be okay and be bold enough to be able to share these topics, share my heart, but also knowing that if I'm sharing it, it's because God wants me to put it out there because it's going to help
Hmm.
somebody else, and letting them know that like they're not alone. And that's kind of just what's really been big for me. So it's like I want to make sure that I'm always as authentic and transparent as I can be, and then just kind of being able to share that to the best of my ability, which is always the hard part, because there's a lot of things where I don't expect to be as transparent, and I
Hmm.
surprise myself in being more transparent than I anticipated.
I like what you said there about kind of like the emotional context, putting your whole self into the music. Because honestly, some of the best music out there is people writing from their heart, writing from the feeling, the inside. Sometimes it's painful, sometimes it's joyful, but it's like that. I think really speaks to people because they can relate to it, and so I think that really that mindset that you're going into will help really reach out to other people and really get them to connect with your music. So I really like that part of it, that part of your creative process. For someone who may want to look at, or really, I guess the better question would be, when it comes to other artists that are out there, just to kind of get a feel for what your sound is like, who have people compared you to, or who would you compare yourself to as far as your sound goes, and then and others in regards to who's like influenced you in your musical process?
That's a great question. As far as before, I used to get a lot of comparison to Coi Leray, which I don't think we sound alike at all. I don't listen to her neither, but
Hmm.
it's usually like because they see a woman that's melodic, and just that's literally like that's initially my core, is I'm very
Hmm.
melodic, but at the same time, like I love to be able to tell a story. Some of my musical influences can run as deep as Lecrae, Trip, when it comes to the artistic approach of being able to tell a story.
Hmm.
And then as far as just like the feeling of like being able to share your heart, from Drake, Bryson Tiller, um, Summer Walker, like just these R&B, but at the same time, like they don't just stay within that box of being
Hmm.
within R&B. They do expound on their lanes. And even just like stuff from Chris Brown. Um, I was like, if anybody's old enough to know who these people are, Boys to Men.
Oh yes.
um, because my dad was a very big Boys to Men fan. So like growing
Hmm.
up, that's what we listened to in the house. Um, Luther Vandross, and
Hmm.
just Five Heartbeats. I mean, yeah, Five Heartbeats. It was a movie that my dad used to play for us all the time. A lot of different musical influences, but mainly as far as me growing up listening to music,
Hmm.
it'll be anywhere from Drake, Bryson, Summer Walker, and then just when it comes to Boyz II Men and just how their heart was and their
Hmm.
style of writing music. You got Mario, you have Sierra,
Hmm.
just being able to share their hearts and putting themselves out there. I think for the most part, that's kind of just where I would land at. Whereas if you had to kind of the feeling, I think that's what I'll compare myself, is that feeling. You have 2000s Drake, and then you have that era when Bryson came out, where it's that 2000s, that 90s era of what love feels like, what hurt feels like. That's kind of what I try to tap into, is the feeling of
Hmm.
everything.
Like you mentioned, Boys to Men, because growing up for me, that was group that I loved. I mean, just again the harmony between the four of them at the time, and just you mentioned them, and I'm thinking, um, oh, what's the song? I can't even think about it. Motown Philly back again.
Hmm.
That song, and yeah, I think that's a really good. Having listened to the EP, I think that's a really good description to the different. I mean, really influences you've had there in in your style, and you know touching on that EP that you have coming out here on the 24th. It's called Growing Pains. So with that, what does that title mean to you personally? Like, what's the story behind that?
So growing pains is that inevitable feeling that you need, that from pain comes the beauty of being able to grow into whom it is that God has called you to be. And me personally, I don't always agree with that, because it's like, well, why can't I just grow without the pain? But sometimes it's just a reminder of you don't want to be back here. With growing pains itself, it's really just, it's a story. It's a compilation of different stories that I put together, and just like things that I've learned within my journey. And it kind of starts off very like dark, eerie, but then it takes a turn towards the end where it's just like, at the end of it all, like, you can only really grow once you truly learn to let go of something and take everything for what it really is. And that's usually the hard part, because it's essentially a lot easier to put blame on somebody else, or put blame on your situation, even put blame on God, as opposed to just taking the accountability and learning that everything that happens, even the things that are bad, he's using it for our good. So there's a lot of growth that can be learned in the pain of what's going on in your circumstances and your situations. And that's just what that EP is really about, is these are the things that I've learned within myself, within just being in relationships with people, whether it's platonic, romantic, just like things that I've learned growing up, becoming an adult.
I like the very first track, the very beginning of it, when I was listening to it, and there's a little bit of Van Halen in there. And I was like, okay, where's this going? So I was like, it's an interesting intro. Any little story of why that sample was put in there, kind of to intro the track, just out of curiosity?
So I'll be very honest, my friend put that together, and I'll never forget, like, he sent it to me, and I was in my living room, and at that time I was very upset. Just because I felt like, what's the word I'm looking for? I was bamboozled by something that I wasn't expecting to be bamboozled by. But the whole take on it was just to kind of just be able to showcase like where I was, and then just like that feeling of like that hurt that comes from when you're betrayed. And then as far as like, even with the title itself, called Vice, like Miami Vice, when you're put in a vice, it's like at that point you're just put in a state that is just it's curtains. But at the same time, they picked that, and it felt like it fit the mood. Everything kind of just came together. I had no say on like what to put in. They sent it, and I was like, I love this. We're gonna run with it, and it just came out beautifully.
And I think that the intro is for the song Right Now, if I remember correctly, the Van Halen song Right Now, thinking about it. And in a way, for those of us who might know that song, and just the theme right now, it's like you're in the moment, you're here, you're right now. This is what we're listening to. And going back to the story about the story of growing pains, and why do we have to have the pain to grow? Well, I mean, I'm not sure if you know this, but if I remember correctly, you take a bone, for example, you break a bone, it gets stronger. So it's like, maybe we won't get to the part of breaking, but that pain is going to help us make us a better person in the long run. So I definitely get where you're coming from with that. And one of the tracks that's on the EP is called Blame Game. So I liked it because you make a reference to one of my favorite verses, 1 Corinthians 13, 4-8. And can you kind of walk us through that verse and how it inspired the lyrics to the overall message of the song?
Yeah, so Blame Game is actually one of my favorites. And we took our time putting that one together, because it was a whole different track. Everything But love is so patient, it's so kind. If you're not careful, you even go blind. So within that verse, it's reminding you as far as like what the fruits of the spirit are.
Mm-hmm.
And when it comes to, there's this saying where it's like love can make you go blind, and that's not the case.
Mm-hmm.
Like love shouldn't make you go blind. And if it does, then it becomes fairly dangerous. But that's essentially just that song itself, is that it's the irony of everybody wanting that verse in their lives. They want to be able to have that person, have that trust where love is patient, love is kind, it's not self-seeking, it's not boastful, it's not prideful. Like just all the reminders of what love is and what it's not.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, nobody wants to take accountability. That song is really just about accountability. Okay. It's like we've gotten into this place where we've grown so accustomed to pointing the fingers at everybody instead of looking at what God tells us love truly is. And in that mess of a game, it's at the end of it, it's like one person decided to take accountability and I decided to take accountability. Yeah. Because at that point, it's just like, I don't want to play the game. Like love shouldn't be a game. And why are we playing this game? But it's just what I feel like culture's in right now, where it's like everybody says they want love, but in reality, they don't want to adhere to the standards of what love consists of. And just with that being said, it's like, I would rather just put blame, because then I don't have to stay accountable for what love actually requires from me.
Wow, I'm just like, got kind of goosebumps when you said that. Because I was like, that makes a lot of sense. You go into the track, it's like, okay, what is this about? And you described it very well as far as that, we need to be responsible for our own actions. And for, again, love is a two-way street. You have to, if you don't do your part of it, it's no good. So I like how that song came about, and it's really got a lot impactful moments in it too as well. So glad that you put a lot of work into that one for sure.
I would say the end part is basically a conversation that's happening, where towards the end, where it's like you're still the one to blame, and it's like someone's like, I know it's my fault. It's your fault. I know it's my fault. So it's really just a conversation within like yourself. Like at this point, it's like, who's gonna stop the cycle? Who's gonna stop the game?
That's just us, ourselves. That's the only place who can stop it. Now, out of all the tracks on Growing Pains, what do you think listeners would need to know about the overall message of the EP?
That's a great question. I'd say the overall message of what I would like for the listeners to take away is that in the event, if you find or you resonate with any one of the records, it's just knowing that I didn't stay in that place. God was able to go ahead and do just a whole 180, a transformation with how I think, how I handle things, and just the situations and certain things that I decide to cultivate and give my time. So it's just learning that, giving yourself grace. If you do find yourself in any one of these records and things like that, is giving yourself grace, because there's light on the other side. But at the same time, like if you do find yourself here, it's like, don't feel bad. It doesn't make you any less of a believer. It doesn't make you any less of a God-fearing personnel, because we're human. We get angry, and that's really what the project is entailing. It's a roller coaster, an embodiment of different emotions. Because even from how the records feel from the beginning towards the end, it starts off dark and then it ends off very bright. And how everything feels. So I feel like when you're going through that process of just growing, like it's painful. Like you got all these different things that's happening. It's like, it's just a reminder that things are going to get better. It may not happen right away or right when we want it, but they do end up getting better. It's all just about your perspective, how you want to look at your situation. And if you want to look at it as you being the victim, you'll always be the victim. And that's kind of how it started. I looked at myself as the victim and then had a turning point.
So it's your journey. It's your journey of the, like you said, the roller coaster of ups and downs that we have as believers, because we Satan comes after us first because
Yep.
we're fighting. My other question was going to be like, well, where would you recommend someone new to listening to start? But I think starting from the beginning would be the best place because you want to listen to that whole journey. It's sequential. You want to make sure you listen to it in order to get that full purpose from what I'm understanding. So that's very logical in that in that aspect. But you did mention, you've gotten through the journey. This EP is coming out. Let's look ahead to the future. Where do you see your music taking you next? Are there any collaborations, themes, directions you're excited to explore that you can talk about? Anything like that? Maybe going on the road a little bit, performing. What do we have to look at for the future?
So for the future, a lot of different collaborations with a lot of my friends that are very much like near and dear to my heart, and they're also very much like heavy hitters within the space, and I just have the utmost respect for them and being able to like cultivate like something new. My whole thing is just being able to try different sounds. So still keeping my main core, what everybody has to listen to is like very much melodic. You'll still have very much melodic Jekka, but it might be, on more stuff like drill. It might be on more stuff like West Coast. Like I'm really excited. I got a West Coast little project, and I'm super excited because I'm from the East Coast. But I felt like if you didn't know any better, you would think that that's where I'm from, just because of just how well it meshed together. But that's why I think it just comes with a certain swag. Like California has this certain swag, especially like the San Francisco area, where it's just like there's just a certain swagger that is just like it just meshed really well. But looking for stuff like that, you'll hear some West Coast, you'll hear some R&B worship, you're gonna hear some pop, which I'm very excited about too. Just a lot of different things, but a lot of things that I think is going to be beautiful. As far as when it comes to shows, we're still working in the midst of all those different things. My goal, if not by this year, maybe sometime next year, is actually being able to like host a show of my own here in Florida. Be able to maybe get some of my friends come out and just, be a part of something great. I don't live in Miami no more. I actually do live in Orlando now.
Oh, okay, perfect.
So, just being able to like trying to put some roots here, like real roots here, and just trying to like expand and see what happens. But as far as for the future is being able to hear the more healed and breakthrough side of Jekasole. So it's like being able to take everybody through my journey, because I'm very much intentional as far as the direction that I'm headed with the type of music, is letting people see where God has taken me from, so that when you hear everything that's coming, you know that the joy, the peace, and the breakthrough is real and it means something. And if I have a different way of communication in the sense of what I decide to pour my time into, it's like you can understand why. Because I'm letting you know, like, this is what happened, this is my journey, and this is where we're at, and I'm not letting no one derail me from that.
Well, that's awesome. And I know there's a good community out there in Orlando for, I'm actually live in Tampa, so I'm not too far. But I go to Orlando twice a week, for work and for my full-time job. But
Okay.
but yeah, I would definitely be interested in maybe once you start having shows out, definitely got to keep an eye on that and maybe doing some coverage of that too, for sure.
I would love that.
But for those who want to connect with you and listen to more of your music, where can they do that? Where can we find you?
On socials, you can find me on Instagram, Jekasole, so Jekagotsole. With TikTok, same thing. The only thing you put at the end is the number 1. YouTube, you can just look up Jekasole, and then like that's the main 3 socials that I use. I'm trying to get better. There's just too many socials to keep up with now. Yes. I'm like, at this point, I gotta have grace with me. But yeah, those are the 3 main socials you can be able to find me. And what was the other question you had?
It was the music connecting. I know I'm sure you're on Spotify as well. Jekasole on Spotify as well.
Yeah,
so.
Spotify, Apple Music, and YouTube. There you go.
We'll put all the links here in the description of the video, so your listeners, our viewers can take a look at that. So one last question for yourself, to those out there. what words of inspiration can you give someone who's just, who's having those struggles? Is this what Growing Pains is about? Who's having that, hey, I'm having a rough time. What kind of words of advice and wisdom can you give that person?
From a personal standpoint, I would say focus more on how your heart is as opposed to how your craft is.
Mm.
Depending on the type of artist and personnel you want to be, I feel like they go hand in hand. As far as like having a healthy heart, you can make healthy music. But if you're not taking the time to examine your heart and see where you are, you can start to utilize music as your God, and that's dangerous. So I would say just to always give yourself those heart checks. And in the event, if you don't have a community to keep you accountable, in the event if you're not able to find one, just continue to stay in God's face, because I promise you He'll provide one, because I didn't have one.
Mm-hmm.
And luckily enough, He was able to provide one in the midst of my obedience. As far as you being able to create, that's kind of where my community came from. I didn't have nobody to create with, nobody to make music with. I was brand new. And in my obedience of having heart checks, talking to God, being in His face, going to events, slowly but surely started putting a community and creatives all within the same, in my realm and my grasp. So I would say for anybody out there, have grace with yourself, and whatever season you find yourself in, do your heart checks, and then worry more about how your heart is as opposed to your craft is, and know that your pain has a purpose. Never feel like whatever it is that you're going through, nobody else is going through it.
Mm-hmm.
I promise you someone's going through it. Utilize it, record it. Mind you, I'm not telling you put it out there unless God instructs you to do so. But it's a good way for you to reflect, and you being able to release, especially as a creative, where we have so much in our minds where it almost feels like no one understands us and we hit a brick wall. I think that's a good way to give yourself clarity. So I just say that, and then staying true to yourself. Don't let your pain derail you from being able to become who it is God says that you are. And I think that's very important, because your pain can make you do two things. It can help you with your purpose, or it can drop you into an abyss, and you'll stay there.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for sharing your heart with us today, and your journey and the music that that you're putting out there. And for those out there watching, make sure you check out Growing Pains and that standout track Blame Game, available on all streaming platforms January 24th. And don't forget to follow Jekasole for updates on what's coming next.
Sir.
If you love this interview, don't forget to hit that like button, share it with your friends, and let us know your favorite moment in the comments below. Make sure you subscribe to the channel and ring that bell so you never miss an update. This is Mike Laxton for Kingdom Builder TV, and until next time, stay inspired and keep building His kingdom. Thanks for watching.
What's good, y'all? It's your girl Jekasole, aka Bars and Baby Hairs, and you are now locked in with Kingdom Builder, exploring the best in Christian entertainment and inspiring interviews. Stay tuned.